Hi everyone and welcome. We're out here in my garden and it's now the 19th week of providing everybody with updates on my Central Jersey backyard garden, and it's mid-October, so the days are definitely much shorter than they were, say, a month ago. And the temperatures are dropping a lot too. But as you can see, some of the plants are still doing pretty good. You can see some tomatoes out there in the background, still continuing to grow, still continuing to ripen. You still see a fair number of peppers here and there on certain plants. But other plants have, at this point, pretty much come to their end. Plants such as my cucumber. You might remember a week ago I was referring to a couple of these last couple little cucumbers as possibly having the potential to make it. But I think they're history at this point. So this plant is going to come out. All the rest of the cucumber plants have been removed, so that one will be removed as well. Besides removing the cucumber plant, I'm going to be removing some other plants as well. Plants that we looked at last week, such as this pepper plant over here that has already been picked clean of all of the pepper pods. So it's still hanging out here and looking okay, except that it serves no purpose in the garden anymore. I'm going to do what a lot of people do, which is, simply cut the plant off down low. And by doing so, that leaves the root structure down in the earth to decompose and provide nutrients to the microorganisms and ground-dwelling critters that help build the soil and aerate the soil, and also create little cavities throughout the soil for drainage. And I guess other plants besides those that have no pepper pods on them are plants such as this that do have pepper pods on them, but they're so small, see that? And so weak that I don't think that they're going to really lead to anything at this point. So the largest pepper pod on this one here doesn't seem like it's really going to grow much larger. So I don't know if it's worth keeping around. It might just be another plant that I remove and end up just using as food for my vermicomposting bins. You probably noticed these tomatoes that are growing down here as well. They've always been here as sort of companions to keep my cucumbers company, and I just left them there as a curiosity. They probably just popped out of seeds that were present in my compost. But none of these really ever had the potential to grow to the point where they would start to yield any fruit. But they just kind of looked cool, so I left them there. But they're probably going to come out as well, so as to serve the purpose of being worm food and being something with which I can nourish my worm farm. Here too, it's just another pepper plant that has no peppers remaining on it. I believe we actually took a peek at this plant maybe in last week's video, and we noted how the bottom of the plant was starting to grow new shoots and get bushy down low, and it looked kind of nice. But there again, it's a plant that's not really serving much purpose out here in the garden, so it too is going to be removed soon. Here's a little oddity though. We were just talking about the tomatoes earlier, and here's one tomato plant that actually grew out of the compost that these flowers were planted in. And it looks like these are cherry tomatoes. And actually one of the cherry tomatoes even ripened here on the stem. So even though I didn't really have cherry tomatoes this year, I can almost say that now I can say that I do. I didn't know what kind of tomato plant this was when it was starting to pop out of the soil, but now that it's actually set some fruit and revealed what types of tomatoes grow on it, I believe I could tell now just from the appearance of it that these are cherry tomatoes. And I guess maybe at some point I'll take that little tomato off and eat it, give it a try, maybe even try to preserve some of the seeds that are in it, because that's the one thing I missed this year. Is I've always really enjoyed growing cherry tomatoes, and the one plant that I had that looked like they might be cherry tomatoes kind of withered out and ended very early in the season. So the seeds from this tomato right here could actually be the basis on which I grow some cherry tomatoes next season. Now right next to the tomato plant, we've got one of the very few peppers that is growing sweet peppers. It's got a couple pepper pods growing on it that are decent enough size to eat. But here higher up on the plant, these little pepper pods are probably never going to mature to a size good enough to eat. So starting to run really low on the last few sweet peppers that are growing out here in the garden. Yeah, I guess the opposite of that are these jalapenos. These are some pretty spicy jalapeno peppers. Although if you cut the seeds out and cut the inner cage for the seeds out, they are nice and sweet and crunchy. So it just depends on how you like to eat them and how you like to prepare them for eating, that you can sort of tailor them to your liking. So I've been trying to preserve these to let them last, because there's so few of them. But here and there I'll pick one off and eat it with a sandwich or something. So my hope was to have jalapenos going into the end of the season. And as you can see, I've still got maybe half a dozen remaining here that I'm going to ration carefully until the end of the season. Going a little further down though, there's this very elegant looking pepper plant with these really bright, beautiful peppers on them. But if you've been watching my channel, you'll know that anytime that I've ever tried picking these and eating them to go along with a sandwich or something, they're really very thin-skinned, not very flavorful. So I think they're really eye candy as far as I'm concerned. They just look really cool in the garden, and even though they're not really worth eating, which is why there's so many on the plant, they still look really cool sitting here. So even though I've been tempted to remove it a few times, I've just continued to leave it because they look so interesting. But I gotta say, it is very nice to be able to just come out into the garden and just walk over to one of these pepper plants and grab a nice fresh pepper. Even though they are a bit spicy, most of them, they are fairly abundant still. And hopefully it'll be possible to continue picking peppers from these plants for a few more weeks before it gets too cold. So I'm just curious to see when we're going to get that first frost, and it'll be at that point that all of these are going to have to come off the plants and go somewhere safe so they don't freeze. Over here at the end of the row where the tomatoes are growing are these couple small cantaloupes. They look really cool. They've got that distinct cantaloupe appearance on their outer rinds, but I don't know if they're really exhibiting the signs of being ripe yet. Normally that would be showing sort of a little bit of a detachment over here where the stem is connected to the fruit, and then you can also smell the inside of the fruit at that point coming out through the stem. That's usually an indication that the fruit is becoming ripe. So I'm leaving them to grow a little bit longer and see what happens. Fortunately, the plant is still doing pretty well, so I'm going to keep checking in on these to see if at one point they might be ready to be picked and eaten. So we shall see with these, but I think they look so cool sitting here in the garden. And that leaves the tomatoes. What we have growing out here are some really good sized beefsteak tomatoes, as you can see when you compare their size to my hand. And there's quite a few still growing on the plant here and there. Maybe not all perfect. You can see this one has some sort of a stain or a blemish on it. But as we go down the row, you can see that most plants are still producing tomatoes. Even up here, higher up on the stalk, some pretty good sized fruit starting to pop out. And here and there we've got a ripe one on the plant, even though most of the ripe stuff gets picked when it's ready and eaten. Like here are those tangerine tomatoes, the ones that take on this interesting yellow orangish color when they're ripe. And they're really tasty, very sweet. There's a number of these plants here on the end, but at the moment none of them are producing any sort of a ripe fruit, so hopefully we'll still have a couple more of these come in before the season ends. This here paper that was covering this marker is now all withered away and shredded on the ground, so we can now see what kind of a tomato this was here. These sort of oval tomatoes. Apparently they're for paste. They're a good paste tomato. So I've been eating them as, you know, kind of a side dish when I'm eating a sandwich or something. You can see there's a fair number of them that are ripe and ready to go. But as we go up on the plant, you can see there's still ones that are ripening here, and even as we make our way up to the top, there's quite a number of them remaining on the plant. Up and coming stuff, hopefully. Although stuff at the very tip is kind of small. I'm not sure if that'll make it before the cold weather sets in, so we'll see. Everything else heading down this way is also progressing nicely. Pretty good sized stuff growing here in places. Even a couple of these heirloom tomatoes that are finally ripening. We've checked in on this tomato here a number of times, and we've continued to wonder, hey, when is this one going to get ripe finally? This is one of those types of tomatoes that maintains a certain greenish color when it's ripe. So this might actually be getting close to being ripe, even though it looks very green. And it's also a very delicious tomato. So that's where we stand right now in the tomato section. Not bad, considering it's mid-October. So I'm pretty sure that covers everything that's still remaining here in my garden and growing and flourishing. But I don't expect it to last much longer. It is getting late in the season. And I guess a week from now we're going to be into the late October time frame. That means the days will continue to get shorter, and the weather will continue to get cooler, and the plants will continue slowing down their growth and production. And as time goes on, the fruits will be continued to get picked and eaten and consumed, so the days are certainly numbered. But luckily we're still getting some pretty mild temperatures and nice weather. So the garden continues to grow, and I'll continue producing updates as far as I can, as long as there's still something to see here. But by the next time we check in on my garden, it's very likely that a lot of those plants that are really not producing anything anymore and don't really have much of a purpose anymore will have been removed. So things might look a little bit more sparse here the next time we check in. So be sure to come back to see that video. It'll probably be in about a week's time. But that's it for now. Hopefully you enjoyed this update. If you did, then, you know, always remember to give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate that, and consider becoming a subscriber to the channel as well. That's always really appreciated as well. Alright everyone, thanks so much for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.